Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, at least in Europe. Yeah, it's in your case 207. Different part of the world are connected here. My name is Francesco Di Madaloni. I am the co-editor-in-chief for the International Journal Managing Project in Business, which together today with Professor Jeffrey Pinto and Rodrigo Juarez from Leeds are going to basically lead you towards this special issue call that we believe is really, really exciting and timely. So also connected is Eric and Yushin, which are the social media editors for the journal. So any news about the call, any news about the activity, or what we are open for submission, go straight to them. And we are going to record this call today. And so that everyone can access it later for having more information. Basically, I want to introduce, first of all, Rodrigo, which is leading the call, and then a few words from Jeff that everybody knows. So he extensively published in management and project management through the years, and I'm really glad to have him on the team. So Rodrigo, I'm going to leave you the space for talking about this special issue, and then before you start explaining the call itself, Jeff can also jump in for introducing himself.
Yes, thank you very much, Francesco, for that. As a quick introduction as well from myself, I am Rodrigo Juarez. I'm a lecturer in project management at the University of Leeds, in the Leeds Center for Projects. And I'm really happy to be leading these call for papers. Had many discussions with you, Francesco, with Natalie about this topic, which is one of perhaps the topics that I think it's really under research in project management in general. Francesco knows this really well. Project termination in itself, and where we go more specifically into the details of the topic. That was a big part of the PhD that I did at the University of Leeds. So I am particularly interested in unplanned termination, particularly during the delivery stage, and that was what really motivated this initial call for papers, right? Then, of course, as we went on with the discussions, we tried to broaden it a bit more into actually project closure so that we could really provide a wider opportunity into exploring what project termination is, project closure is, and perhaps what sparked this initial conversation was this fundamental question on when does a project really end? And we're gonna go and discuss a bit more about this as we go on. I'm just also gonna give the word to Professor Pinto for an introduction as well, and then we can keep going on with this exciting conversation.
So thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be on this call, and I very much appreciate Rodrigo and Francesco's leadership in undertaking this. I think what I find what brought me personally to this topic, or made me very interested in this proposal that was offered, was, if we think about it, we have spent an enormous amount of time researching project front end, and necessarily so, but spending an awful lot of time understanding the strategic implications of the front end, the organization of the front end, governance around the front end, all these ideas to try and set up the project to succeed. And along the way, I guess I do agree with Rodrigo and Francesco here that I think what we've done implicitly there is we've neglected an equally critical element. And I say that advisedly when I say equally critical. I don't think oftentimes we really see it as being equally important, which is probably why we haven't spent as much time on it. But the fact remains that if we consider the termination phase of a project, either termination due to success or termination due to failure, these sorts of challenges, we really haven't spent enough time, in my opinion, understanding the implications of this area, of the decision-making that's involved, the kinds of issues that pertain, some of which are very normal and understandable, many of which are unexpected, come out of frustration, anger, litigation, all sorts of other concerns as well that typify what can happen in a badly managed termination process of a project. And to me, this is what I found fascinating about this call in the first place, was trying to shed light on, frankly, an under-researched area. And I say that as somebody who's done a lot of research over the years in project management, but also has written a textbook on this. And I can tell you that there's not nearly enough work being done to consider the wide spectrum of decision-making and critical issues involved on project termination. And so I'm particularly excited about the opportunity to be involved on the editor side of this special call, because I think it's so broad and offers so many avenues for researchers to propose papers, to attack different aspects of this, that it makes me very excited personally. I think intellectually very curious and interested in where this call is going to take us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeff. You know, I'm with you 100%. There is so much space to approach both the planned and unplanned termination for a project, right? So from a legal perspective, for example, what are the legal consequences of unplanned termination? What are the psychological effect of unplanned termination, for example, or planned as well? So there are so many different perspectives that the authors can think about. Does the governance or termination stage change compared to the governance that we set at the front end? So we never ask actually this question, right? So the governance may change in the way that we plan or unplan for termination. And this goes into the over focus, as you mentioned, or measuring the performance of project managers, measuring the performance, how well project to be managed. And then we shift as well our attention on, but what is the really performance of the project itself, that we also investigate towards when a project really ends, when its effect actually protracts over time, leaving space here for what we think about the long-term impact of the project, the legacy of the project, which is part of a phase that has been completed, but the effect protracts over time. So in this case, it's not project management termination, but actually wondering the boundaries of the project is effect itself, when we see project, as the unit of analysis here. This is really interesting for me to understand. Before going to the call itself, explaining what we look at, what we don't look at, it's really important to see that we seek for multidisciplinary approach and research, innovative type of methods, which, if, for example, I'm doing some work on legacy, which is mainly based on archival research, and something that is missing a bit in project management, right? We over-rely on case studies and interviews or survey, but there are so many other different approaches and methods that can actually inform how things have been actually done and what we can learn from it. So don't underestimate the power of secondary data, for example. And this is something really important to me, to see also multiplicity or methodology applied in this call, and also, of course, a multidisciplinary area of interest that links there. So, Rodrigo, if you want, we can start talking about a little bit, and then we're gonna carry on with the conversation.
Yes, sure, Francesco. Definitely. Many thanks for that quick introduction, as well as Professor Pinto. I think, as you've been rightly pointing out, this topic is really interesting, really under research. And what we're trying to do with this is try to continue and sparking this debate on something that we're trying to understand, not just as an outcome, not just as a final decision, as in what project termination is, but to really understand the process. How do we reach to that point, whether it was planned or unplanned? But there's a series of decisions that go around the decision of termination in itself that we don't really have a clear understanding of that. And it's really a key core of what we're trying to achieve with this call for papers. So definitely, I will share the screen with you. The call for papers so that we can go into the little details of that and what we're trying to achieve with this call for papers, and of course start the conversation. With that, please let me know if you can see the call for papers in the screen now. Perfect. So as perhaps for everyone here, you've heard that perhaps we've been talking about project closure, and we talk about plan termination and on-plan termination.
Rodrigo, can you enlarge it's very small.
Is that better?
It's getting much better now, yeah.
Hope we can see it better now.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect. So typically when we talk about termination, and I don't want to go defining everything specifically so that we can have a bit more time in termination, in definitions, but I think it's important just to mention what we mean with termination, both planned and unplanned, right? With planned termination, as perhaps many of you that are really interested in these call for papers have read, we refer to it as the characteristic of projects which lead to a structured conclusion and learning. And as Professor Pinto rightly mentioned, this is extracted directly from from your book, which I think it does provide, at least it provided also for my PhD, some inspiration on that. And also we lead more into the unplanned termination as well, which what we're also trying to shift a bit with this whole conversation is that project termination is often perceived as negative and as a waste of resources, right? But it's mostly also important to see it as perhaps a vital activity to meet new strategic goals. Project termination, we almost consider it as the premature cessation of project activities before we formally complete the project. But it does have a strategic role, and that's what we're trying to identify with this call for papers, right? What happens when the project finishes by either type of termination? What led to that? And that's what we really started to try to dig deeper into, trying to understand what are the long-term impacts of project termination, what are those ripple effects, those unintended outcomes, what are perhaps those challenges that we identify once a project is terminated, either planned or unplanned. Do we need really, for instance, apart from the project manager, do we need a new figure that's highly specialized on project closure and everything that entails, right? I'm happy to see Sarah also here, because I had also a few conversations with her, and it also leads to perhaps some discussions on, does that project closure or end stage of a project starts perhaps a new life cycle of a project once the official termination of that project occur? And we can go on with many perhaps different views, different approaches to understand that. And it's something that really, that I truly think that it has a lot of merit of what we can discuss and we can go on with. So to continue with that, the other aim of this special issue, and perhaps the most important one, is try to understand what project closure and termination is as a process rather than as an outcome, as we were as I was mentioning before, and try to understand the causes, evaluation of decision-making mechanisms, and the analysis of these complexities that lead to the closure of the project. We want to understand what are those effects, short-term, long-term, after the project has been closed, and what or investigate how the effect of such projects have, whether it was a planned or unplanned termination in the society, whether those effects are either positive or negative. For instance, personally, a big part of the research that I have been doing, and perhaps some of you might know, starts from the research of the cancellation of a big infrastructure project that was happening in Mexico, a big airport, a $13 billion airport that until now and for the next 30 years, we still have to pay for that airport as if it was being delivered, but nothing was delivered in the end. A new airport and a different project started sparking that whole debate and conversation, as in whether termination is, of course, good or bad. And I don't want to get necessarily into the conversation of that, but it does have long effects for at least the Mexican economy, right? And how projects are being delivered there. We know, and we have other examples of what has happened in other countries. We have the examples of Italy, for instance, with the nuclear sector following the referendum in 1987, where until now, Italy does not have nuclear power because of that decision, similar to what happened in Austria many years ago, right? Once the Schwentendorf nuclear power plant was completed. But we have other examples that perhaps are a bit more successful on what has been happening. And there's a lot of examples on the US with the whole changes in governments on the different priorities, whether the US is transitioning towards more sustainable projects. And we have the cancellation of Keystone XL pipeline and the Atlantic Coast Pipeline as well. So there's different, really different examples of different situations that have been happening worldwide, as in what has led to that perhaps unplanned termination. But we also want to know a lot of what's happening with planned termination, right? What were those series of decisions that led to that? So if we go to the website, you will see that we have a lot of topics that we're trying to cover with that. It's not just about infrastructure. I want to specify that. We're opening to the broader spectrum of projects, different sectors, different views on that. So we have included a list of topic areas. And Eric, could I please ask you to share the link on the chat if this has not been done so, just so that also authors can access it. And yeah, so with these topic areas, we try to cover different aspects of projects, from the project organization to the project outcomes to the long-term effects, how organizations deal with planned or unplanned termination. In my experience and some of the interviews I've done through this, I've had responses where some project managers tell me, oh, it's very easy how we deal with this. We don't, because if a project was canceled and it was because of a negative, perhaps, outcome of the project, then we just don't document it. Why? Because it was a failure, so there is no need to learn from that. Well, that could lead to many debates, right, on whether it's useful or not, because it really depends on the learning aspect that the organization has. Some other people really have told me, there's a lot of value into that, because it really shapes the way in which we plan projects later on, how we adapt when we are entering a new market, and how to deal with perhaps the regulatory environment that we're going to be facing, a cultural aspect of how we're going to be making business with new organizations. Just to mention a few of the conversations I've had, right? So of course, there's many different ways in which we can look at that. So, Francesco, Professor Pinto, do you want to add something onto that?
One thing that I would mention, and it's just as long as we're thinking creatively right now, and I apologize in the background, there's a sound of a mower going on. One of the things to consider as you're looking at different aspects of the termination process, I think you've done a really good job of highlighting some of the significant issues here related to planned versus unplanned terminations and what the implications are, what can factor into this at the front end, causal factors, what are effect factors as well. One option I would just like to tease people with to consider as part of this is if we could step beyond just the simple actions of termination themselves and consider, for example, what are the implications of our understanding of the termination phase, and how does that affect other knowledge that we're trying to generate? For example, we are all aware that there's an ongoing debate, and I'm not going to weigh in one way or the other on this right now, but there's an ongoing debate that has to do with cost overruns in projects, or looking at issues of success in projects. That these are ongoing streams of research that we've gone into in a lot of detail. But what occurs to me is, if we don't understand when a project ends, we have a real conundrum when we're trying to determine how do we assess the success or failure of the project. You see, if we can't make up our minds, and I'm not even saying there's an answer to this, I'm just saying this is something we need to pose and consider. If we're not clear on when a project ends, or if the termination phase in effect is not well defined, then issues like effective sustainability in the project, or value, or benefit. How do we determine when benefits are actually derived? How do we determine when value should be assessed if we're not clear on when a project effectively ends? Moreover, if we're looking at issues of project cost overruns, which, as I said, is a very big topic right now, and we have protagonists and antagonists on both sides of that coin, but a larger issue to me has to do with, if we're measuring under a very constrained economic model that identifies only a very prescribed front end and a line in the sand on the back end, we're missing, in effect, a lot of opportunities for collecting data. So long and short of it is, what I would suggest is, this is an excellent starting point here in terms of assessing some of the key research questions. But if I could ask us to even pull this out another level and consider our decision-making on what constitutes the termination of a project, is going to have massive effects on other aspects that we're studying as well. It's just something to think about.
You're on mute, Francesco.
Here we are. So just to add to what, the reflection of Jeff is extremely important, to really have a this understanding, or also the boundaries condition or your reflection, right? When we think about the processes and practice of termination, which may be planned, unplanned. To give you an example, we may assume that unplanned termination, something that has been cut, is a bad thing, right? But actually may be a good thing, right? But the only thing that we don't have today is the knowledge around that. We miss really to capture data and knowledge on the effect of such planned and unplanned termination at the long-term effect of the project itself. We talk about value creation, sustainability, legacy. So many organizations are framing now project towards leaving a positive legacy. Legacy is a long-term impact. And what we miss actually is to understand if such legacy has been achieved at some point or not. So today it remains a promise that nobody has checked if it has been delivered or not. So I'm really interesting also to know about that. I'm really interested to know how this long-term view of sustainability and value has been achieved, which may go beyond economic and social or environmental issue, right? And this is something that, I just recently published for ijPM a paper on legacy. You can see this mega project producing as a money-making machine, producing some very good economic result. But on the other hand, what was really interesting to find out is that while the economics went up or is keeping going up, the social goes down. So the social effect actually does not reflect the economic result of the project. You learn about that. You try to understand why it happened, why it's happening, and what can we learn from it? From a design point of view, from a management point of view, from really a process point of view, how to manage a project also is ongoing benefit or the benefit that will be delivered in a long time. So for that reason, it opens up to so many perspectives. When you first rightly said, Rodrigo, came to me about let's do this, yeah, I say, well, if we only focus on project management termination, right? So when a project really ends within the project domain, will be too restrictive, yeah, too restrictive to have a conversation also on what actually the performance of the project is as well, and when actually project really ends. Yeah, because what I'm really interested from my perspective is to understand the long-term effect of the project as well. Can be framed, yeah, into how this plan or unplanned termination then lead to what we can observe today. And this is something, the actuality, right? The actuality of this planned and unplanned termination that is missing today to be understood. And this is what really makes me excited about the call. Before I'm going to ask the audience if they have any question. I can see also a message there. I want to share with you what actually the expectations are on publishing for managing project in business. So I'm going to share just a couple of slides. Just give me a second. Here we are, so share, and then you should be able now to see the presentation in front of you. Gonna put it in a presentation mode. Yeah. Can you see it in front of you?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. So it's really important, yeah, that you remember that our journal is based on business and management. And we publish papers around business and management. So this is extremely important. Even though you may have an engineering focus, this should be management engineering. Yeah. So remember that the scope and aim of the journal is towards promoting project management from a business and management perspective. Of course, we encourage publication of novel insight. I think that this call offers you a lot, yeah, in that space to be innovative, to have something new that has not been published before, which is actually shaping our understanding on the performance of project and the performance of planned and unplanned termination, and also exploring new avenues. Yeah, as I mentioned before, try to explore a different type of methods. Go beyond a merely simple systematic review. Even though if you go with a review paper, try to conceptualize it in a way that really brings some theoretical and practical implication to the field. Use different method and methodological approach. So as I said, if you want to look back to the project, archival research, use of secondary data can be very, very powerful. Ethnography approach, for example, if you are facing the effect or an abandoned, for example, project in close proximity of where you live. And this is extremely important. For example, the paper I published for ijMPB, we had 3 co-authors that were directly affected by this port complex, right? So they had also this first-hand view because they were living actually in the proximity of the project, which will enrich, of course, the result of it. What is really important to remind you that we are not interested in over-technical papers, yeah, based on modeling, algorithm, applied mathematics, for example. Those papers are not in the scope of the journal, are difficult, yeah, to be reviewed as well, and we don't feel to have that audience for our journal. So we are not really interested in over technical papers based on algorithms and heavy mathematics. Something that also I want to share with you is the type of submission and acceptance. You can see that since January, we having a really good increase on number of submission. And however, also the acceptance ratio really decreased. So we are around 10%, 10.5% acceptance rate. Yeah, you can see at the moment we have published, I think, 42 or 43 papers so far out of 420 that have been submitted. So for that reason, be aware that if there is no space or fit, for your article in the journal, this will be desk rejected probably. Has to be in project management, has to be on project studies. Project have to be at the center of your investigation, right? Because this is a project management journal. So remember that. Sometimes we receive papers which are not at all in project management or very, very far from project studies. And this will not make the paper advance to the desk, from the desk stage to the review stage. Another thing is that you can find the two special issues that are at the moment open, but the one that is beyond the final chapter, unveiling project closure through termination practice and long-term outcome, closes on the 1st of December. Yeah, this is the barcode that you can scan and go straight to the website and see what we need, what the expectations are. Okay, so don't hesitate to contact any of the guest editors. Yeah, so Rodrigo is the leading editor, so any information will be through his control, and also is the one managing the system. Yeah, so he decides if it's a desk rejection or not. He will allocate reviewers, so he's the one taking the lead for this call. Now, I think we set the scene, right? I don't know. I think there is, if someone from the audience want to ask a question, please do. This is the right time to engage with us in a conversation. I think somebody wrote also in the chat. So Eric, if you can double check as well. So Linjo.
Thank you. Thank you, Francesco, and nice presentation, Rodrigo and Jeff. I think this is really interesting topic, and I think several years ago I come across a study written that's in one of the other journals. If I remember correctly, that was Journal of Management and Engineering. They were also investigating something related with early termination. And recently I saw panel data collecting the overseas investment for Chinese government and China state-owned companies, and they call it disruptions, which about the early terminations of the overseas investments of large projects. So I want to understand the conceptual level, the difference between terms. Very simple. Like here we have the early termination, and we have the final chapter. Maybe it's a fancy word, but we also have the disruption. What you see in your eye will be the differences between these terms. And if we want to submit it in papers in the future, and how should we differentiate these terms, and how should we, be careful about these?
Thank you very much for that, Linjo. I think there's a couple of things that or concepts that I think will be important to be precise on when a paper is being submitted on that, because we can conceptualize perhaps termination if it's unplanned or not. If we're looking at, for instance, suspension of a certain contract or of the project at some point, then how long is that suspension, right? And if after that suspension, for instance, it's that project is resumed, is it resumed in the same way, or perhaps after the suspension it becomes a new project? So we might start from that initial conceptualization, right? As in, what does that mean in a way? We might just look at the early termination. So for instance, a big part of my initial research on that was just and I define termination as that, or that was my main focus, as in a project that was cancelled through the delivery stage before it reached the completion of the physical infrastructure, because that was the setting I was perhaps investigating, right? We might be looking at that before it reaches the completion of the contract or contracts that that project might have going on. It might be a partial termination in perhaps a project in a bigger program. I don't know, it could really go into many different directions. You might be looking at the project that has been completed, contract deliverables, everything has been achieved. And then that's where we start more with the closure aspect, right? What happened around that area where we completed or achieved everything that we expected to achieve, but then leads more into what comes afterwards, right? Whether it's more on the terms of outcomes, legacy, value, that leads more into the aftermath of what happened really at the point of termination. So I think it would be really important that you clarify, in my view, where you're standing at in that perhaps, I don't know if this would be the right word, but in that temporality of where that termination suspension occurs, and then where you're looking at either you're looking at something that is happening after a few years, if you're stepping into a certain point on the delivery stage on the front end, you're looking at the operational aspect of that and what's happening in between. And that really will define or allow us to understand really what is that stage of the project that you might be looking at and what are you defining as in the point of termination, suspension, closure, to try to give or to avoid that ambiguity in terms of what you really want to focus on the paper.
And just to add, Rodrigo, this is really interesting, right? Because ontologically, we need to be precise, right? We can call and differentiate these stages in a different way. Probably we need also an order, yeah, on and a clarity on such concept that we keep mixing up. And probably this may be one of the contributions really to go into the literature, to have a search in the literature and see and have a kind of ontological clarity on how those terms have been used in which way. And this may be an idea for the authors also to engage on a review of the literature on how termination, closure, early end, planned, unplanned, have been actually discussed. And something may emerge really interesting there. We have a question on the chat, and then I think Sarah wanted to ask something. I don't know if Sarah, if your microphone works. No, but
Sorry.
you can chat. I can hear you, I think.
We can hear you.
I can hear you, but I can't.
We can hear you, Sarah. You're
Can
actually
you? Oh,
yeah,
perfect,
Yes,
because
yes,
it's telling
yes,
me
we
my
can hear you.
microphone is unusable. Okay, thank you. That's lovely. Thank you. Okay, so I was going to take my perspective really aligns more with Jeff's, looking more holistically around closure. So my particular interest is around ex post evaluation of projects using benefits realization. So what actually came out of the back end in terms of outputs and impact, and how sustainable those might be in the long term. So you're talking about earlier about legacy. So I guess that's really where this comes, my particular interest comes into it. And one of the themes that I am particularly interested in is in ex post evaluation. So once everything, the execution has died down, the outputs are out there, they have been transitioned from the project into the operational arena. They've been adopted, they're utilised to whatever extent that actually might be. So what precise value did we get out of the project in the first instance? So that's a particular interest of mine, and I think it possibly aligns more with what Jeff was saying earlier about number one, sustainability, and that number two, looking more systems thinking more holistically around just closure and termination projects.
Well, feeding on what you're saying, Sarah, one of the other issues involved in that, which for me is personally has always been fascinating, is the sort of the brainwashing. I'm going to be blunt here. Is sort of the political brainwashing that oftentimes happens on the aftermath of these projects. In other words, we spend so much time on the front end getting the project going, keeping the project going, trying our best to maintain the project, and then there's precious little other than showing for public works projects, for example, other than showing that it actually now works. There's very little done on a holistic method to look at it ex post and try and understand, okay, how did it play out? Because often there's a paucity of information on evaluations of major projects on the back end, other than the fact that, hey, the Elizabeth line is great, it's clean. Or the Second Avenue subway in New York is great, it's used a lot. But we sort of then sweep everything else under the carpet. And I agree with you. I think going after some reasonable ex post analysis of these projects, especially when you start when it's almost a moving target. Okay, well, if we're talking about budget, well, our budget was terrible, but so let's not talk about that. Let's talk about benefits. Oh, the benefits were pretty good. Let's talk about value. We keep kind of shifting the focus during the ex post phase to try and find the narrative that aligns most with the current political decision making.
Yes. And I would agree absolutely with that, because it's not necessarily in ministers' best interests to talk about their projects, notwithstanding the fact that so many of them churn in their positions anyway, and governments change, so priorities change, and the visibility that they want on particular projects change as well. So my recent research was into ex post project benefits evaluation, and it was specifically for UK government. So what were they thinking when they were putting together front end, when they were thinking about putting together their business case, and this huge amount of benefits, which everything was going to be sweetness and light, and then being able to say, okay, well, which one of those are actually relevant to what we would measure outside, at the back end of those projects. And I entirely agree with you that so much has been written over the last several years and researched around setting up for success, that the back end is a lot less mature. So I think it's very canny of you to actually start looking at this arena, because I think it's actually as important how you close out for success as well as start for success.
One other very awkward, based on what you were just saying, one other very awkward question that would be fascinating for someone to look at is doing a content analysis of justification statements on the front end of a project as to why we want to do this, and then compare that with assessments of the project on the back end and what was pulled from it and what we're now trumpeting, and to see what sort of correlation are we looking at between front-end justification and back-end assessment.
Exactly.
I suspect it would be embarrassingly small.
We may find some very surprising result. What I really need to reinforce as the editor-in-chief for the journal is that don't be over descriptive in the article, because just a description of what you can observe doesn't lead you to be published. So everything has to be grounded into what we know and what we don't know yet. So the literature review has to be there. You need to engage and position your paper towards a clear stream or debate that is over there in project management, and from which theoretical perspective are you making sense of your result. What is your theoretical lens that helps to explain you this causal relationship, for example. This is extremely important. So being over descriptive will not lead you there, right? So because you may provide a strong practical implication, but as an academic journal, we also need some theoretical implication, right? So make sure that you ground your result and discussion towards a clear perspective that help us to make sense of things, right? And this is extremely important. We have 5 minutes left, and I think there is one message on the chat for Bilar. Bilar, yes, AI mega project sustainability sounds good, but please look into what is required, what our expectations are for this special issue. Yeah, the special issue looks into the termination, plan and unplanned, and the long-term effect of project. If you can link, if you can link also this to this theoretical debate, and provide a contribution in that space, I recommend you to submit for the special issue. If you don't feel the link or your work on what we are discussing today and what our expectations are, just feel free to submit to a normal, to do a normal submission and not to a special issue. Yeah, Bilal. Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Professor. Thank you very much for your clarification. Am I audible?
Yeah, yes. Now we can hear you well. Yes.
Yes, because I want that I want to submit some. I mean, in agile projects, if there is the project closure is many times. I mean, you can say that the first iteration release, then the first phase close in agile. So if I want to submit in that way, I mean, there is the project is not the traditional project. It is the agile. Then in that case, what you recommend, please?
Well, you can approach the termination stage of a project from different perspectives, right? From different methodologies, from different contexts, which are not limited to infrastructure project, for example, right? So see, for example, the drug development, how many of those projects are prematurely terminated because they are not making sense. So there is different way of approaching termination and closure. From an agile point of view, probably Jeff is the one that has more knowledge than me, but maybe a different lens and perspective to investigate as soon there is a contribution and understanding of our termination, planned, unplanned, for example, or the effect of it is understood and perceived. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
I don't know if you agree with me, Jeff. Thinking about agile as a method to deliver.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Please, I didn't listen. Couldn't listen that.
No, I was asking Jeff if he's got something to add because he wrote a lot about agile, and if you should think about agile and close and termination, Jeff, how would you think about that?
Wow. It's a big topic. I think the one thing that comes that I'm learning in this area right now is that it's such an evolving concept right now as to its utility. So what I mean by that is from a termination point of view, an AI point of view, I think I think what it's calling for, quite honestly, and listening to Bilal's question is exactly some of the things that he's proposing. That is thinking creatively about how the concepts of AI are going to be applied in terms just thinking off the top of my head. What we're doing right now is looking at AI as a method to sift and factor sentiment analysis, looking at what is the general in large scale projects, what is the general attitude found from social media, from other forms, from newspaper editorials, et cetera, to see what is the sentiment analysis that's emerging on the project over the course of time. How does that evolve as the project nears completion? And using AI as a means to acquire that information and understand and acknowledge it. So I guess what I would say is that my use of it right now, at least, is more on a tool basis than on a broader scheme of looking at AI within its utility factors in these kinds of questions. And so it's an interesting question that Bilal asks. It's not one that I have a ready answer for, but I think it's an area that, as I said with some folks in a recent essay in ijPM, we have to learn to embrace AI. I think we said warts and all. We just have to recognize that it's the coming thing, and we have to acknowledge how can we make best use of it to answer these kinds of questions. So I think it's an intriguing area to look at.
Ninjo, and then we had to leave. Ninjo, you are on mute?
No, it's not mute, but I can't hear it.
No, we cannot hear you, Ninjo. I don't know why.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I saw just one quick question. I saw the deadlines on December the 1st. Is this somewhat extendable, or is this definite deadline?
So yeah, from an editor point of view, it's just the 1st of December. And then we will see if we can compromise that somehow. But we try to stick with the deadline. And if somebody's really interested, really can write me an email that we can discuss. Yeah, an eventual extension of it. Yeah, but please get in touch with Rodrigo, and if you have something interesting in mind, just discuss with us. So we open to adjustments. Okay. So it's 3:00 in UK sharp. So thank you very much, Jeff, for being here. Thank you very much, Rodrigo, for leading this special issue. Thank you for Eric and Jishan for organizing around, and to those that have attended. This will be recorded and will be uploaded, so everyone can actually go back to the discussion that we had today. But be creative, yeah. Even though if you're thinking about AI or Agile in this case, right, Bilar, or the post-evaluation through Sarah comments, try to put something that really links to what we're looking for, and be creative on that, supported by good data, good theorization and practical implication that we expected to achieve. Thank you very much, really, for being here today, and the best of luck with your submission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Professor. Bye-bye.